That guy got hit in the head with a coconut!
Patrick, what about my break?
Oh yeah, your break. Tomorrow, I promise.
Hey everyone, Letism Today here. Recently, with this whole controversy going on between the quote-unquote breadtube community, which is essentially the sphere of ANCOMs, and mainly just radical liberals or red liberals, if you will, such as ContraPoint, H-Bomber Guy, etc. These quote-unquote, anti-capitalists who talk about idpol and try to seem woke. This has been going on between that community, the breadtube community, and this supposed quote-unquote tanky community, which encompasses Marxist-Leninism. I'm also going to be discussing some of the highlights of the debate between this guy who's a self-ascribed left communist and Vaush, who basically has self-ascribed himself to be an anarcho-communist. But it's quite funny, the arguments he brings up, considering the history of, a lot of the organizations that the ANCOMs typically support, like the CNT, FIA, and their history with bureaucracy and labor camp, Makhno's treatment of peasants, the peasant chain gangs, etc. First of all, I just want to say that we should never, as Marxist-Leninists, be undialectical. Being undialectical will get us nowhere, and if we resort to that, we're just succumbing to liberalism. We must remember to be dialectical. Now, some people have a problem with ideology. These people are absolutely not our priority. We are not focusing on people that have a consistent, undeniable problem with ideology. These include ideologues. Now, Vaush is in every way, shape, and form an ideologue. He self-admits to not reading any books, so he isn't backed up by any theory. Marxist-Lenin, we go through Marx and Engels, we go through Lenin and his contributions with the Vanguard Party and imperialism, and we typically go on to Mao, and we understand that, Mao Zedong thought was this, widely successful application of, however you define the word successful, of Marxist-Leninism in China. And then nowadays, with the new growing phenomenon of Maoism, we see Maoism being applied all over the world, from the Naxalites to Nepal. We can really start to see how this theoretical base has grown and continued. And through the dialectic, we have now created the synthesis of modern-day Maoism. Like, could you expect Marx and Engels to know about modern-day Maoism? Of course not. But that is just what the dialectic has created. This is our synthesis. However, when we are discussing, especially online, it is important to understand that A, some people are disingenuous, and B, some people are completely and utterly ideological. They rely solely off of shit they heard on YouTube, or idealist shit like, the abolition of unjust hierarchy, however you define unjust. Like unjust, oppressive, authoritarian. If you read Lenin, you understand that these are all very subjective concepts, and it's important to not throw around these buzzwords like Vaush does. First of all, this debate with Vaush is just inherently flawed, okay? You can't have a left com argue for Marxism-Leninism. That's like having a Titoist argue for Maoism with another Titoist, right? Both are just going to agree on the same conclusion. Now, I do give this left com guy a lot of credit because he understands the importance of Marxism-Leninism. He isn't like a lot of Trotskyists who think that Marxism-Leninism is just this insane, form of authoritarian state capitalism, and because Stalin, was just this authoritarian octopus with his tentacles all around the world, it spread. Like, he understands that Marxism-Leninism has legitimately grown all around the world. Revolutions have occurred as Marx has predicted. Now, I'm not going to be showing clips of the debate because it is a 4-hour-long live stream. So I'm just going to be pointing out the highlights of the debate with timestamps. So at 11:50, this left communist guy is basically trying to define Vaush's definition of what a tanky is. I mean, historically, back in the 1970s when we had the, the Eurocoms, we had this division between them and the supporters of Khrushchev and the supporters of the Soviet Union. And specifically the Soviet Union's invasion and prevention of the Hungarian Revolution via tanks, and that's what the term tanky came from. Now, interestingly enough, Vaush seems to think that the Hungarian Revolution being crushed was the fault of Stalin. Well, this is just funny, because let's look at this comment by this fan of Vaush here. I know you're not super into reading and such, but you've got a couple theory, historical knowledge, and general rest of the world knowledge holes that you'd really benefit enormously from filling up a bit. Yeah, like the fact that Stalin was in the grave. Stalin was dead. when that happened. Stalin was not alive. Stalin is not omnipotent. Like, does this guy literally think that Stalin did the, sent in tanks to stop the Hungarian Revolution? You can't be a Marxist-Leninist and support Khrushchev, because Khrushchev, A, reintroduced private property, and B, began to reintroduce markets, producing for exchange for profit. So it's essentially being the same thing as, being an anarchist and a fascist. Like, they are polar opposites. Capitalism and socialism are binary concepts. Khrushchev had the objective of de-Stalinization. How do you support someone and then support, getting rid of him at the same time? At 12:04, okay, Vaush gives his definition of tankies, which are people that, number one, lack theory, which is quite hilarious because he even self-admittedly hates theory, and he pretends that people that read theory are LARPers, which is hilarious because reading theory is one of the least LARPiest things you can do. I mean, like, you're literally putting yourself in a position to understand this ideology. You're not just using it for show. He basically is upset because there are people on Twitter that trolled him by pretending to be tankies, making gulag memes, etc. It's so funny because there's a point in the debate, and it's only the first hour of the 4-hour live stream, by the way. Vaush is trying to separate Marxist-Leninists from Stalin, as if Marxist-Leninists don't support Stalin, and as if Stalin didn't synthesize Marx and Lenin's work into Marxism-Leninism. Like, he's like, oh yeah, you guys like Marx? Oh yeah, that's cool. And he's like, oh yeah, you guys like Lenin? And then he totally name drops, I think it was State and Revolution. It's like, dude, if you read State and Revolution, you would know that Lenin wasn't an anarchist, dude. Lenin advocated for a vanguard party. It's so hilarious, dude. He just name drops all these books. It's like, nowadays you can just Google the name of books and suddenly people will take you seriously just because you're a e-celeb gamer. He keeps using the word authoritarianism and oppression here, the two words. And he's saying that tankies do not like the USSR for all it provided, doctor prescribed holidays, free education, free healthcare, guaranteed employment, guaranteed housing, etc. Tankies don't like it for this. Oh, they like it for the authoritarianism. They like it for oppression. And it's like, dude, number one, can you point to an individual like this who sincerely believes in his, beliefs and isn't a fucking troll on Twitter or Discord? And this left com explains it perfectly. Back in the day in Chan culture, the more replies you got, okay, the further up your message would be bumped. So your message would appear at the top. So that's why the whole trolling, that's where trolling came from, was Chan culture and trying to get attention. Anyway, this whole notion, if you actually read Lenin, dude, and stop LARPing, you would know that authoritarianism and oppression are subjective, okay? Now, does that mean they don't exist? No. Of course, authoritarianism and oppression exist, but they're subjective, right? You can't objectively define authoritarianism. And if you can, then it's definitely not the way that the USSR, the DPRK, Maoist China, Cuba, Burkina Faso, etc. operated. And at 1320, he continues this notion that Marxist-Leninists are somehow different from quote-unquote Stalinists. He uses the word Stalinism and Stalinist. This is a trot term. It's completely made up. Stalin did not make Stalinism. You don't go Marxist, Leninist, Stalinist, Maoist. That's not a real thing. Stalin contributed, a lot about applying Marxism-Lenin to the material conditions of Russia. When we think of this quote-unquote Stalinism, which isn't a real thing, by the way, we need to think of it as the equivalency to Mao Zedong thought. So what we really need to think of this quote-unquote Stalinism is Marxism-Leninism applied to feudal Russia, applied to the Soviet Union. And so it's funny because he doesn't understand what material condition means. He just thinks that material condition is, whatever economic system you're in. No, that's the mode of production. Material conditions have to do with a lot more because there is the base and the superstructure. The superstructure of Russia, okay, and the Slavic world is generally extremely reactionary. I mean, we had Joseph Stalin growing up as a priest. Nowadays, we can see in Poland and in in Russia that they have a very huge anti-homosexual culture. I mean, can we really blame Stalin though? No, we don't blame people as materialists, because people are ultimately products of the base, of the economic base. A bourgeoisie child is not the same thing as a working class child. They're not the same kind of people because they're from different material conditions. And so do I blame Stalin? No, I blame reactionary Russia, and I blame the material conditions that brought forth because of the church. Like, look at the way the church treats homosexuals and has its doctrine about homosexual. Meanwhile, Vaush takes this completely fucking undialectical stance. He acts like as if, the Slavic culture has never been reactionary towards homosexuals. He acts like, one day evil Stalin man came and made gay people illegal. It's just this completely, totally simplistic view on Stalin. And even the leftcom, and I apologize for referring to him as the leftcom, I think his name was Badman, essentially referred to him as being a circumstance of the material conditions, which is correct. That is the materialist analysis of Stalin. And it's just hilarious how they don't use a single Marxist-Leninist as an example. Let's point to this Marxist-Leninist. Let's point to this. No, we're just fucking talking about random trolls, random Discord trolls. Hilarious. At 1357, he starts talking about the Warsaw Pact, which is funny because nations in the Warsaw Pact were in the Warsaw Pact not because Stalin was an octopus with tentacles, but for protection. I mean, Google Thomas Sankara. Google the African Revolution. Cuba barely had a revolution. Cuba was invaded, or basically invaded. If that happened with the Warsaw Pact, at least you had muscle behind you so you can stop it. And that's why the Warsaw Pact has so much propaganda behind it, because it wasn't like Burkina Faso, where you could just roll in, assassinate this leader who dares to give his people rights after horrible French imperialism. Stalin wasn't shooting ICBMs at nations that were attempting to leave the Warsaw Pact. Stalin was fucking dead. Stalin was in the grave. Again, at 15, Vaush starts talking about the USSR did this, the USSR did that, the USSR did this. Dude, this is the problem with anarchists, okay? Anarchists believe that states are autonomous beings. They aren't material. Like, this is why anarchists are not Marxists, because they don't take a scientific materialist approach to understanding leadership. Stalin had the USSR in this direction, and Khrushchev had the USSR in the complete polar opposite direction. It's like calling 1776 America the same thing as 2019 America. Different material conditions spawn different leaders, okay? No ML defends the USSR post-Stalin because Khrushchev and onward were not Marxist-Leninists. This is infallible, okay? De-Stalinization is a real thing. Google it. Oh yeah, I remember how, Marxist-Leninist Gorbachev was. You remember that guy? Ooh, foreign capital. Now that's something Lenin would be dying for. Foreign capital. Oh yeah, it's not like he wrote a book about foreign capital and how it fucks the world. At 16, 18, I just love how he's talking about sectarianism and theory and providing for the community when he's literally a shitty bread tuber, e-celeb, gamer. Like, he's fucking a child of destiny. What theory have you provided to the community, dude? What have you done to progress your belief? And it's hilarious because at 1720, he starts talking about, this is how we paint our house. He's talking about the representatives of socialism/communism. And he brings up fucking communism 101. Dude, Reddit is literally the most liberal website you will ever use in your entire life. Reddit is where people get funny gifs of cat pictures. And you're seriously talking about, like, if people are looking into communism by looking at Reddit, then they aren't seriously fucking interested in communism. No more class consciousness. The website people use to look up funny cat images has messed up. I mean, read the chat too. There's this comment in the chat, dude, tankies, let's just leave this conveniently undefined, are even supporting Pol Pot. That guy that was overthrown by the Vietnamese communists after, going fucking nationalist and prim and specifically hoped for the fall of communism. This is a quote that you can Google. You know what I think is communism? Accepting random aid from the United States and Great Britain for literally no reason. Oh yeah, I know of a reason, because Pol Pot was insane. At 1854, he talks about, I have never seen tankies out there advocating. I've never seen, tankies in the world. It's like, dude, the Naxalite, FARC, various groups in Africa, Nepal, Maoist rebels, all over the world. These people exist. These people are in actual real warfare. These people seriously exist. They are in the process of beginning a protracted people's war. This is real. This is not the internet. This is actual fighting and bullets and death and blood being spilled for Marxist-Leninism, Maoism. Is that are they just tankies to you? Is the FARC tanky? Are Naxalites tankies? And I love at 1946, he doesn't even know that trots exist. Like, come on. I love how the leftcom is like, well, that there are a group of people out there on the left that really support U.S. imperialism because it would better the material conditions. This is the fucking Westerner trot take. This is the modern day trot take. Is that North Korea should be a victim of imperialism from the U.S. to quote unquote make it better, to better the material conditions, quote unquote. Oh yeah, because look at Africa. Look at just the sprawling material conditions in Africa. Look how prosperous Africa is. And East Asia. Oh yeah, definitely. You know, rich people getting richer. Oh yeah, like look at Singapore. It has big buildings. That means it's rich, right? That means everyone is just living in a utopia. You know, look at the United Arab Emirates. You know, look at Hong Kong. Oh, big buildings. That means it's a paradise. And the most ridiculous thing out of this entire debate is that Vaush called for the death of tankies. Yes, this is someone who bitches and complains about authoritarianism, calling for the death of a group of people due to the political ideology. Now, I don't know if he means literal death. It sounded like he did. I don't want to cancel culture for tinkies. I want them fucking dead. That's his quote. So you want people who believe in an ideology to be dead. Newsflash for everybody. Number 1, Marxist-Leninists support Stalin and Mao. Number 2, you have never read fucking theory in your life. You claim that Marx and Lenin said X, Y, and Z, but you've never read them. I guarantee if you ever talk to me, ever, if a fucking bread tuber ever talked to me, they would literally have their career destroyed. Unironically, I'm not even joking. Like, I could ask you some basic ass questions like, what does chapter 3 say in fucking State and Revolution? And you would literally shit your pants. Like, you would have no response. Like, I wouldn't even have to test you on theory, dude. Like, I can literally ask you, what does a book say? Oh, I don't like reading books. I just like to play video games, you know? Like this, oh, I like to play Zelda. Don't fucking talk about something that has people spilling their blood over it. Don't talk about real issues. Like, if you want to be this chill, relaxed person that sits back and plays video games and just wants to have fun with people, go ahead. But don't sprinkle in the ideology that has been fought and died for. Don't fucking try to shill to Marxist-Leninist when you don't even know what a fucking Marxist-Leninist is. When you don't even know what a tanky is. You define tanky by internet meme. Like, dude, you realize that Nazbol, Gulag, and all that other shit are literally memes, right? Like, the reason why people joke about Gulag is because Gulags are so incredibly exaggerated. Anyway, this has been Leftism Today. If you enjoy my video, please like, please subscribe. I'm sorry for the bullshit e-drama, but this was really just a sort of wider reply to these talking points. You know, this whole, because believe it or not, even though I'm responding specifically to Vaush here, Vaush does have an audience. And even though these guys are mainly just rad libs, NComs, etc., some left coms, some trots, it's very important to note that these guys are potentially able to become Marxist-Leninists if they read. I mean, where was I? Back in the day, I was an ANCOM. I read The Conquest of Bread. I read Mutual Aid. So those were my main 2 books by Kropotkin. And even when I read The Conquest of Bread, I had questions because The Conquest of Bread is an incredibly utopic book. Like, how are we going to share food? Like, how are we going to put food into a stockpile? This is the shit that Kropotkin never expanded on. He was an idealist. He was a utopic socialist. And so once I started reading Marxism and I started understanding what Marxism-Leninism is, then I really got into the ideology. I read Mao, I read Lenin, I read Marx. I haven't read enough of Stalin, unfortunately, but I need to make time to read more of Stalin. And then again, there even is more theory that I haven't read. There's, you know, Che, who provided a lot of very good insight. There's Castro. It's just incredible how much you missed. I missed a lot of stuff by Engels too. I still have reading to do myself. And here's Vaush acting like a fucking know-it-all. He can't even concede that he doesn't read shit, and he completely works off of ideology. It's ridiculous. Anyway, Leftism Today. I'll see you guys later. The next video I publish is definitely not going to be like this. It's going to be probably another in-depth response video now that I have a bit more time. But I will see you guys later. See ya.